Good day, learners, and welcome to another session in our teaching series, Hidden Facts in Biology. We are going to be looking at sense organs, and in this video, we'll be covering three of those sense organs: the nose, the tongue, and the skin. But by way of introduction, let us define what a sense organ is. A sense organ is a group of specialized cells, tissues, or receptors which are able to receive, perceive, or detect stimulus and also transmit information, impulses, and messages to the central nervous system. It is important for us to know that most cells in the body are sensitive to stimuli, but some cells are specialized to detect only one type of stimulus, and these cells are called the sensory cell or sensory receptors. And there are four groups of these sensory receptors, and these include: number one, the mechanoreceptor. The mechanoreceptors actually respond to pressure or touch. There's also the chemoreceptors. The chemoreceptors respond to chemicals like taste and smelling. And then we have the thermoreceptors. The thermoreceptors respond to temperature. That is, if an environment is hot or cold. Lastly, we have the photoreceptors, which respond to the stimulus of light. There are 5 sense organs in human body, and they are: number 1, the eye; 2, the ear; 3, the nose; 4, the tongue; and 5, the skin. Now we'll look at these organs and their function. The first one is the eye. The eye is the sense of sight. We see with our eye. Then the ear is a sense for hearing and balance. We hear with our ears, and the ear also helps us to maintain balance. The nose is for smell, while the tongue is for sense of taste. Then the skin is a sense of touch, pain, heat, cold, and pressure. And each of these organs has what is known as the nerve endings. And these nerve endings receive impulses and relay these impulses to the central nervous system. So after this brief introduction, we are going to be looking at some of these sense organs. The first one we'll look at is the organ of smell, which is the nose. The nose is the organ of smell, and as such, it is also known as the olfactory organ, and it is linked to the brain by the olfactory nerves. The sensory cells in the nose can be stimulated by substances dissolved in the moist mucous membrane covering the inside of the nostrils. And it is important to know that the upper portion of the nasal chambers has many sensory nerve cells, and it is these sensory nerve endings that join together to form an olfactory nerve that goes to the olfactory lobe of the brain. So now, what process is responsible for the perception of smell? Perception of smell, how does it happen? It happens thus. First of all, when chemical substance carried in the air passes through the nostrils, their molecules dissolve in the moist membrane and stimulate the sensory nerve endings. And remember, we said that these sensory nerve endings join to form an olfactory nerve and stimulate the sensory nerve endings, which join to form an olfactory nerve that passes to the cerebrum of the brain. The function of the brain is for interpretation. So the brain then interprets the chemical impulses, and the sensation of smell is produced. Of note is that the sensory nerves of smell that are exposed to a particular odor over a period of time becomes sensitive or conditioned to that odor and are unable to respond to it. So this explains why, for example, if you have been in a room for a long time, that's you spray a perfume and someone walks into the room and says, "Wow, this room is smelling nice," and you are like, "I can't perceive it." That is because your sensory nerves to smell have been conditioned to that smell because it has been exposed to it for a long period of time. However, the person that just walked into that room, the sensory nerves are just being exposed to that smell. Also, another thing I want you to know is that the sense of smell in man is poor and limited compared to other animals. What are the functions of the organ of smell? The function of the organ of smell include: number 1, it helps in avoiding bad and poisonous food. With the organ of smell, smell of burning food or leakage of cooking gas can be detected, and immediate actions are taken to remedy the situations. Animals depend on smell greatly to help them locate food, to mate, and escape from their predator. Number 4. Unfamiliar and dangerous odor, such as those from wild animals, can be detected and avoided. With the sense of smell also, trained dogs are used to trail criminals by detecting the odor left by the criminals. And also, after moving long distances, dogs are able to find their way back home by relying on their organ of smell. Lastly, the nasal mucus contains lysozymes, which kill bacteria and viruses. So these are the few functions of the organs of smell. There can be some defects to the organ of smell. So now we look at the defects of the organ of smell. For someone not to be able to detect a particular odor, people who cannot detect a particular odor are suffering from a condition known as anosmia. And in this anosmia, it is possible that the olfactory portion of their cerebral cortex may have been damaged, thus resulting in this defect. The next sense organ we are going to be looking at is the organ of taste. The organ of taste is the tongue. Sensory cells of taste, which open to the surface of the tongue by a pore, can be found on the tiny swellings located on the exposed surface of the tongue. These sensory cells are grouped into taste buds and are connected by fine sensory nerves to the brain, which give information on what is tasted. The tongue is actually sensitive to 4 primary tastes, and these are: number 1, the sweet taste; 2, the sour taste; 3, the salty taste; and 4, the bitter taste. And each region of the tongue is sensitive to these individual tastes. For example, the back of the tongue is sensitive to bitter stimuli. The sides of the tongue are sensitive to salt and sour stimuli, while the tip is sensitive to sweet sensation. We'll show this in a diagram. From this diagram, we can see that the back of the tongue is sensitive to bitter taste. That is where it's labeled bitter. Then at the sides, we have the sour and the salt taste. Then at the tip, we have the sweet taste. So this shows the 4 primary areas of taste of the tongue. It is also an established fact that the tongue can also detect alkaline taste, texture of food, and its temperature. There are factors that affect taste by the tongue, and some of these factors will be listed below. Factors that affect taste by the tongue. Number 1, the hotness and coldness of the food being tasted. Number 2, the quantity of food being chewed at the same time. Number 3, when the nostrils are closed or open when chewing the food. And number 4, the taster's health condition. Having a look at the tongue, now we are going to be taking a look at the skin as a sense organ. The skin as a sense organ. The skin is made up of the epidermis, which is the outer layer, the dermis, which is the middle layer, and the hypodermis, which is the subcutaneous layer. In the dermis of the skin, there are 5 sense receptors, namely the touch receptor, pressure receptor, pain receptor, heat, and the cold receptor. Their sensory nerve endings are unevenly distributed in the skin. So a diagram showing the vertical section of the mammalian skin will be shown, and with it will explain the different receptors of the skin. This diagram shows different levered parts of the skin, but we are going to be talking about only the receptors. The pain sense receptors are sensitive to pain, and when they are stimulated, they give rise to the sensation of pain. The next receptor there is the touch sense receptor, which is sensitive to touch. They are also known as the Meissner's corpuscle. If you prick your skin, for example, with a needle, you will feel the touch sensation. Also, sense of touch is greatly developed in the fingertips of blind people, and this can help them identify objects and for reading braille. Now, let's look at the receptors for temperature. There are actually 2 temperature receptors in the skin, and these are the heat and the cold receptors. The heat receptors detect heat, while the cold receptors detect cold. And these 2 receptors make us aware of temperature changes. And lastly is the pressure receptors. The pressure receptors are known as the Pacinian corpuscles, and they are receptors that respond to pressure They are located deep in the skin and they respond to very heavy touch. This brings us to the end of this session. We have looked at the nose, the tongue, and the skin as sense organs. So now we are going to be taking some questions concerning these three sense organs. Now let's look at the first example. Example 1. It says, which of the following parts of the tongue does not correspond to the taste indicated against it? A. Tip to sweet. B. Center to salt. C. Back to sour. D. Side to sour. E. Back to bitter. The correct answer is C, because the back of the tongue is for bitter taste, not sour. The next question says, which of the following parts of the tongue is sensitive to sugar? A. Tip. B. Back. C. Right side. D. Left side. E. Under surface. The correct option is A. The tip of the tongue is sensitive to sweet, and sugar is sweet. The next question says, which of the following structures are stimulated by touch, pressure, pain, heat, and cold? A. Receptors. B. Synapse. C. Cell bodies. D. Myelin sheath. E. Relay neurons. The answer to this question is A. Receptors are structures that are stimulated by pressure, pain, heat, and cold, and these receptors are mostly found in the skin. The next question says, which of the following stimuli are not perceived through the skin of mammals? A. Light. B. Pressure. C. Pain. D. Heat. E. Cold. The correct option is A. Photoreceptors, that is receptors that detect light, are not present in the skin, and thus light can't be perceived by the mammalian skin. So the next question, it says, the human skin is regarded as a sense organ because A. It separates the body from the outside world. B. It protects the body from cold and heat. C. It regulates the water content of the body. And D. It has an outer layer of dead cells, while E says it has nerve endings. The correct option is E, because the human skin is regarded as a sense organ because it has nerve endings, which can be stimulated by changes in the external environment. So the next question, the mammalian skin can insulate the body from cold because it has A. Epidermal cells. B. Nerve endings. C. The subcutaneous fatty layer. D. The sebaceous gland. E. The Mapinga layer. The correct option is C. The mammalian skin can insulate the body from cold because it has subcutaneous fatty layer, which serves as an insulator. This brings us to the end of the questions. Now we'll take some exercise. This exercise here are taken from our book in Hidden Facts, the Test of Biology, in pages 241, and the answers are provided in the answer page of the book. Do well to get your copy and check if the answers are correct. Thank you.